Natasha stepped into the Harringtons' grand gala, the entire room paused, then burst into quiet snickers. What none of them realized was that within the next hour, the woman they mocked would bring a 40-year empire to its knees. "Natasha, dear, did you bring your own dinner?" Patricia Harrington asked, raising her wine glass like a royal scepter. "I worried our menu might be too refined for your taste." Laughter rippled across the table. Uncles, cousins, business partners, everyone joined in. Natasha Taylor, now 32, never imagined that 3 years of marriage to David Harrington would repeatedly place her in these situations. Once again, she sat in the family's mansion, surrounded by antique crystal and polished silverware, quietly becoming the evening's entertainment. "Mom, please," David said softly, his voice barely reaching the center of the table. He didn't dare look up. "Oh, don't be dramatic," his sister Victoria chimed in, smoothing her perfectly styled hair. "We're just teasing. Natasha knows we're joking." "Right. Nat?" The nickname struck like a slap. Natasha calmly lifted her glass, her hands steady, eyes alert. She didn't look away. She simply observed each face one by one, as if she were memorizing them. "Of course, Victoria. Just a bit of fun," she replied, her voice so even that a few guests glanced at each other, unsure. 2 months earlier, at Patricia's birthday, the scene had been almost identical. "Natasha, you must feel so fortunate to be part of our family," Patricia had said loudly, in front of dozens of guests. "I suppose this kind of chance must have been rare where you grew up." The laughter that followed had echoed through the entire house while David hid behind his phone. 6 months before that, during Christmas, David's father, Richard Harrington, had made a point to speak just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me, Natasha, does your family celebrate Christmas, or do you have other customs?" Oh, the way he said other left no room for doubt. Every comment, every smirk, every whispered joke, Natasha had stored them all away. Not from bitterness or despair, but with the precision of someone quietly assembling evidence. Richard now stood at the head of the long dining table, lifting his glass. "Let's make a toast," he announced. His tailored Italian suit matched the confidence of a man who had never faced resistance in his life. "Tonight, we celebrate another remarkable quarter for Harrington Industries. Record numbers, global growth, and billions secured for the future," Patricia added proudly. "Exactly," Richard continued, chest lifted. "Our biggest investors trust our vision." Speaking of investors, Thomas David's cousin and the company's CFO cut in. "Richard, that major fund that joined us last year, what was it? Arcadia Capital? Did they renew their agreement?" Thomas barely glanced in Natasha's direction. As usual, she was invisible. "Oh, they renewed," Richard said with a triumphant smile, "and increased their position. $1.2 billion now. Arcadia is our largest partner. Without them, well, thank goodness smart people recognize great opportunities." "Smart people," Patricia repeated, giving Natasha a pointed look. "Wouldn't you agree?" More laughter. Victoria snapped photos for Instagram, likely captioned with something about tradition and excellence. Natasha quietly placed her napkin on the table. The movement was so gentle that almost no one noticed. Almost. David looked up at last, and something in her expression made him stop breathing. It wasn't frustration, it wasn't sadness. It was the look of someone who had made a final, unchangeable decision. "Natasha, aren't you having dessert?" Patricia asked with exaggerated sympathy. "It's from France. Very different from what you're probably used to." "No, thank you," Natasha said. "I think I've had enough for tonight." Her tone was calm. Too calm. Enough to make Patricia's smile flicker for the first time. "What a shame. David, your wife never appreciates what we offer," Patricia said, rolling her eyes. Natasha's phone rested quietly inside her purse. She didn't need to touch it. She didn't need to confirm the emails she knew were already being delivered. Everything had been set in motion 3 hours earlier, right before the gala, when she sent her lawyer a simple 3-word instruction: execute the plan. Richard lifted his glass again, ready to brag further. The Harringtons have always known how to choose the best partners, the best ventures, the best people? Natasha asked softly. The entire table fell silent. Well, obviously, Richard stuttered, unsettled by the interruption. Obvious, she repeated, her voice almost too gentle. Even David swallowed hard. Victoria rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go, she groaned. Natasha, no one is targeting you. We're family. Sensitive? Natasha repeated under her breath, her fingertips brushing the strap of her purse. Thomas, growing impatient, steered the conversation back to business. Uncle Richard, about next week's meeting with the investors, has Arcadia Capital confirmed? It'd be nice to finally meet the people behind that fund. 3 years with us and they've never shown their faces. Arcadia values quiet, Richard replied proudly. Great fortunes often do. Then he cast a quick look at Natasha. Something some people simply don't understand. Laughter filled the room again. Comfortable, effortless laughter from people who never had to question their place at the table. Natasha lifted her purse, her movements calm and controlled, a sharp contrast to the tension quietly building around her. She didn't storm off. She didn't speak out. She just sat there, observing every expression, every smirk, every assumption. 3 years, she whispered, but everyone heard her. 3 more wonderful years ahead, dear, Patricia toasted cheerfully, completely unaware. After all, joining our family is a gift. Natasha offered a small smile, barely visible, yet David recognized it instantly. It was the same smile she wore late at night when she closed confidential deals on her laptop. The same smile she had when she reviewed financial reports he never once asked about. Lucky, Natasha echoed, tasting the word. Quite an interpretation. Her fingers brushed her phone inside her purse. By now the message had reached the right people. The contracts were already moving. The shares were already shifting. Everything she needed was happening quietly in the background. But she waited. She wanted them to enjoy their dessert, to keep laughing, to feel untouchable. Letting them believe their world was perfect would make what came next far more satisfying. If you're enjoying this story of justice served cold, make sure to subscribe. Natasha's next move will redefine what a twist truly is. Dessert had just been set on the table when Victoria decided the evening needed a new spectacle. She lifted her phone dramatically. Everyone, look at this. There's an account on Instagram called Elite Trophy Wives. Her tone dripped with false sweetness. They posted a list of the top 10 women who obviously married for money. Look, Natasha's in 3rd place. What are the odds? More laughter. Patricia clapped her hands, delighted. Show me that, darling, quickly. Natasha sipped her water, but her grip on the glass tightened until her knuckles went pale. 3 years, 195 days. She had counted every remark, every single one. Natasha, aren't you going to defend yourself? Teased Jennifer, adjusting her sparkling earrings. I mean, maybe they're not wrong. David finally cleared his throat. Guys, this isn't... Richard cut him off, still laughing. Oh, relax, David. Your wife knows we're only teasing. Isn't that right, Natasha? But none of them knew the truth. 6 months earlier, after yet another one of these jokes, Natasha had walked out of this same room, locked herself in the guest bathroom, and cried until she had nothing left. She had looked in the mirror and seen a woman worn down by years of insults. And in that moment, she made a decision. The next morning, she made 3 phone calls. A discreet corporate lawyer, a forensic accountant, someone from her past the Harringtons would never expect. Natasha, Patricia's voice dragged her back. I'm speaking to you. You could at least pretend to defend yourself from these online accusations. Accusations, Natasha repeated, setting her glass down. Her tone changed soft but sharp. That's an interesting choice of word, Patricia. Something in her calmness made Patricia's confident smile tremble ever so slightly. It's just a phrase, dear. Of course it is. Natasha rose from her seat, smoothing the simple dress the family had mocked earlier. Excuse me, I'll be right back. She walked down the marble hallway, passing family portraits stretching across decades rows of confident faces, secure, unquestioned, untouched by hardship. People who had never needed to fight for a place in the world. People who had never been judged before saying a single word. Inside the bathroom, she locked the door and finally checked her phone. 17 unread messages, all from the same number. Her lawyer's updates appeared one after another. 7:47 p.m. All transfers completed. Legal documents delivered via encrypted channels. 8:15 p.m. Press alert issued. Awaiting your approval for Phase 2. Natasha exhaled slowly. Everything was exactly on schedule. Natasha looked at her reflection. 6 months ago, she had stood in this very room, tears streaming down her face. Tonight, the same woman was smiling, but it wasn't joy. It was the smile of someone who had just placed the final chess piece exactly where it needed to be. She typed a short message. Execute Phase 2 in 10 minutes. I want to be at the table when it happens. When she returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted into full celebration. Thomas stood at the head of the table, raising his glass dramatically. $300 million in government contracts secured for the next 5 years, he announced, practically glowing. Dad, you're unbelievable. How did you get Senator Morrison on board? Richard gave a modest shrug, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. Let's just say certain contributions open certain doors, he said with a smirk, and with our largest partner renewing, we have enough capital to expand into 3 more states. Arcadia Capital truly was the best thing that ever happened to this company, Patricia agreed, swirling her wine. Whoever runs that fund must have excellent judgment. Natasha quietly took her seat. David shot her a panicked glance, but she answered with the sweetest smile he had ever seen. A smile that felt less like kindness and more like a warning. Natasha, you're so quiet, Victoria cooed. All this business talk must be exhausting for you. I imagine it makes you feel out of place. Actually, Natasha said, I find it fascinating, especially the part about Arcadia Capital. Thomas laughed loudly. Oh, please, as if you know anything about investments. No offense, but this is way above your experience. My experience, Natasha repeated softly. Something in her tone made David freeze mid-bite. Yes, Thomas, my experience is limited. Only 15 years in corporate finance. The room went still. Patricia released a sharp little laugh. Oh, Natasha, dear. Working as an administrative assistant doesn't count as finance. Administrative assistant, Natasha echoed, her smile turning razor thin. Is that what David told you? David turned bright red. Natasha, this isn't the moment. Isn't the moment for what? She asked, her voice calm. For the truth? For the part where I stop pretending to be the uneducated, small-minded woman your family insists I must be? Richard slammed his palm on the table. Young lady, you are being incredibly out of line. But he didn't get to finish. Thomas's phone vibrated, then Richard's, then Patricia's, then everyone else's. One by one, every device on the table began buzzing with urgent alerts. What now? Thomas muttered. He checked his phone first. His expression shifted red, then pink, then a chalky white. Dad, you need to see this, he whispered. Richard snatched his own phone, adjusting his glasses. He read silently for 5 long seconds. Then he slowly raised his eyes to Natasha. What did you do? He asked, voice barely audible. Me? Natasha blinked innocently. I just checked some updates. Why, Richard? Did something happen? Patricia tore the phone out of her husband's hand. Her voice broke as she read the headline. No, this isn't real. Victoria, always hungry for drama, was already reading aloud. Arcadia Capital announces immediate withdrawal from Harrington Industries due to ethical conflicts. They pulled the full amount, over $1.2 billion. Harrington stock crashes 67% in after-hours trading. The silence that followed was so intense that the ticking of the antique clock suddenly sounded thunderous. Who would even think of? Thomas choked, refreshing the page repeatedly. Dad, this is happening. We're losing millions every second. Arcadia Capital, Natasha said gently, each word falling like a stone into water, has very clear standards about the values of the businesses it supports. She held their gaze. Discrimination, mistreatment, intimidation, these tend to conflict with the fund's mission. Every eye in the room locked onto her. Richard shot to his feet so violently his chair hit the floor. What exactly are you suggesting? He demanded. Suggesting? Natasha tilted her head. Oh, nothing at all. I'm just discussing the values of the fund that... She paused, savoring the words. Pulled over $1 billion out of your company tonight. David finally found his voice. Natasha, he croaked, what do you know about all of this? She looked at her husband, the man who had sat in silence through countless insults, who had never defended her once, and felt absolutely nothing. I know, she said calmly, that consequences don't always arrive quickly, but when they do, they rarely arrive alone. Right on cue, Richard's phone rang. He answered with shaking hands. What? An emergency board meeting? At 10 o'clock? No, I don't know who leaked anything to the press. Patricia was scrolling frantically on her tablet. Richard, there's more, she whispered. There's a full investigative report published 15 minutes ago about us. Racial discrimination in the workplace. Systematic harassment. They have recordings. Recordings of what? Victoria shouted, her voice cracking. Of you, Natasha replied quietly. Of this table. Every dinner for the last 3 years. Every remark, every laugh, every attempt to belittle me documented. Chaos exploded across the dining room. Chairs scraped violently. Voices overlapped in panic. A wine glass shattered on the marble floor. You recorded us? Patricia screamed, her polished composure dissolving. That's illegal. We'll take you to court. Actually, Natasha corrected gently, in this state, only one person needs to agree to the recording. And I agreed. Also, when it comes to discrimination in a business environment, yes, even family business dinners count. The laws are very clear. Thomas was typing frantically on his laptop, panic spreading across his face. The government contracts, he whispered. Dad, Senator Morrison's office just released a statement. They're distancing themselves from us. Everything is falling apart. David grabbed Natasha's arm so tightly she winced. You planned this from the start, he accused. You planned to ruin my family. Natasha calmly slipped her arm out of his grip. Wrong, David. I planned to protect myself. Your family destroyed themselves. I just kept the receipts. You're a snake, Victoria hissed. A gold digger who crept into our home. An opportunist, Natasha corrected, her voice suddenly sharp. One with 2 MBAs, 10 years in investment fund management, and a personal portfolio worth $3 billion long before I ever met David. She paused. But none of you ever asked, did you? Because in your minds, a black woman marrying a Harrington could only want one thing. Silence fell. Not light, awkward silence. Heavy, suffocating. 3 billion? Patricia whispered, almost inaudible. Natasha stood, lifting her purse. Arcadia Capital isn't just a major supporter of Harrington Industries, she said softly. Arcadia Capital is my fund. She let the words settle like dust after a collapse. I founded it 8 years ago under my grandfather's family name, and tonight I decided you were no longer worthy of my support. Richard braced himself against the table, his face drained of color. You're the owner of the fund that kept this company alive? Yes. Natasha checked the time on her simple heirloom watch. And in about 2 minutes, the second stage of my exit will be finalized. That includes liquidating all Harrington shares held indirectly through partner funds. I estimate the loss at another $800 million. You can't do that, Thomas shouted. We'll fight this in court. Until what? Natasha asked, lifting an eyebrow. My lawyers, who are far more competent than yours, present 3 years of documented discrimination. Until those recordings play in open court. Until every investor, every client, every partner sees exactly who you are. Patricia collapsed into her chair, the truth crashing down on her. You waited for this, she whispered. All this time, every dinner, every remark, you were leading us into a trap. I was giving you an opportunity to choose better, Natasha replied. You made it a trap yourselves. David stared at her with something that almost looked like respect, or maybe it was pure shock. Who are you, really? He asked. Natasha paused, considering her answer. I'm someone you should have defended, someone your family should have valued, and most importantly, someone you underestimated. Her heels clicked softly across the marble as she walked toward the exit. At the door, she turned back once more. Oh, and before I forget this dress you all mocked, it cost $150 at a department store. You know why? Because I don't need expensive labels to prove anything. But it seems your family needs $1,200,000,000 of my investment to feel important. The door closed with a soft, final click. Behind her, chaos erupted like wildfire. As Natasha descended the steps of the Harrington estate for the final time, her phone vibrated. Phase 2 complete. Phase 3 ready. The press is exploding with the story. You're trending nationwide. Natasha didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. It was relief. Quiet, long-awaited relief. After 3 years of silence, she was finally free. But what came next and what she had planned for Phase 3 would make the Harringtons wish they had never underestimated the uneducated woman they mocked. 20 minutes later, she pulled up to a discreet office building in the financial district. Marcus Webb, her lawyer and silent partner for 8 years, waited inside with an unopened bottle of wine. "You actually did it," he said, nodding with genuine admiration. 3 years of preparation, 3 years of listening, enduring, and documenting every moment, Natasha said, taking a seat. "They made it easy." Marcus nodded. "People who believe they're untouchable always do." He opened a thick folder. "The recordings have already been sent to 5 major media outlets," he reported. "Harrington Industries' HR department has received 47 anonymous complaints from former employees in the last 2 hours, all reporting years of discrimination." He smiled quietly. "You were right about the domino effect." "And the government contracts?" Natasha asked. "Canceled," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Senator Morrison wants absolutely no connection to a company facing a federal discrimination probe, especially not during election season." A slow, cold satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Richard Harrington is politically finished. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Patricia was frantically dialing her high society contacts. No one answered. Not one. Victoria discovered that 3 luxury brands had terminated her ambassador deals. The dinner footage was everywhere. Her public image was collapsing in real time. But Thomas faced an even harsher blow. The board issued an emergency memo demanding his immediate resignation as CFO. Fiduciary negligence for failing to identify that our largest investor was the daughter-in-law publicly humiliated by the Harrington family. The memo leaked within minutes. David called Natasha 15 times. She blocked him on the 16th. Back at the office. "Phase 3, Marcus asked carefully. "Are you certain?" Natasha looked out at the glowing city skyline. Somewhere in that sea of lights, the Harringtons were watching their world disappear. Money, social standing, reputation. But her work wasn't finished. "Absolutely," she said. "They didn't only target me. They treated dozens of black employees the same way. I've documented 23 cases over the last 5 years. Now they all get justice." Marcus lifted the phone. "So we move forward with the class actions?" "File everything." What the Harringtons didn't know was that losing $1 billion in investments was only the opening move. The real strike, the one Natasha had been setting up for 18 months, was about to turn a financial collapse into something permanent and irreversible. When Phase 3 hit, the Harringtons would finally understand that underestimating a brilliant black woman wasn't just foolish. It was the most expensive mistake of their lives. The next morning, 7 a.m., Richard Harrington woke to 83 notifications. The first alert: Department of Justice launches federal investigation into systematic discrimination at Harrington Industries. The second: 23 former employees file class action lawsuit for discrimination, harassment, and hostile work environment. Estimated damages, $340 million. Patricia's scream echoed from downstairs. "Richard, there are news vans outside." His phone rang again. Thomas in full panic. "Dad, the board removed me, and Victoria lost every brand deal. The stock is at $2.30. Yesterday it was 87. On TV, the morning news played clips from the dinner recordings. Patricia's voice sneered. "Did you bring your own food?" Then Richard's voice. "Does your family celebrate Christmas, or do you have other traditions?" The presenter spoke with outrage. 3 years of documented humiliation toward Natasha Taylor, now revealed to be the founder and CEO of Arcadia Capital, a fund valued at $3.2 billion. David. He sat alone watching the footage of every dinner, every cruel remark he had allowed. His phone buzzed. An email from the legal department. Natasha Taylor has filed for divorce. No alimony requested. Prenup clause activated. All gifts above $5,000 must be returned. David let out a hollow laugh. Those gifts had been bought with her money. The collapse continues. Richard answered a call from the bank. The agent spoke firmly. Mr. Harrington, due to the market crash and removal of key investments, we can no longer guarantee your loans. How long do we have? Richard interrupted weakly. 72 hours before foreclosure on your personal properties. Patricia heard every word. The mansion home to 4 generations would be repossessed in 3 days. Victoria posted a tearful apology online, but the comments were brutal. Too late. Exposed. You don't deserve any brands. Her follower count dropped from 2.1 million to 340,000 in less than a day. In Marcus's office, Natasha watched the news with a calm, steady expression. The 23 former employees will each receive the full settlement, Marcus confirmed. Your documentation made the cases impossible to disprove. Harrington Industries will likely declare bankruptcy within weeks, and the federal investigation, 3 prosecutors have already taken it. He paused. Richard may face criminal charges. Natasha nodded and closed her laptop. Her voice held no triumph, only quiet, measured justice. Send the press release, she instructed. Arcadia Capital will create a $50 million fund to support Black entrepreneurs. If we can tear something down, we can build something better in its place. Her phone buzzed. It was David. Did you plan this from day one? Natasha typed her reply. No. I planned a wedding. You planned my humiliation. I just documented it. Back at the mansion, for the final time, the Harrington family sat together in the same dining room where everything had begun. Same table, same chandelier, same crystal glasses. Only now the silence was the sound of absolute defeat. How did we not see it? Patricia whispered. 3 years. She was right there the whole time. In the family group chat, Natasha's last message remained unread by them all. You never saw me as a person, only as a threat to your perfect world. When you underestimate someone long enough, you never see it coming when they become the only thing standing between you and complete collapse. Richard stared at the large portrait on the wall for generations of confident, privileged faces. Now their world had vanished, not because of an enemy from outside, but because of their own words. Words they never thought would come back to haunt them. Meanwhile, in the quiet of her apartment across the city, Natasha exhaled deeply, freely for the first time in 3 years. She finally understood that the greatest form of justice wasn't destroying those who hurt her, but ensuring no one else would ever suffer what she had endured. But the question remained. What would happen when Richard Harrington made one last, desperate attempt to reclaim his empire? And would Natasha finally find the peace she had been searching for? Or would the weight of justice come with a price of its own? 6 months later, Natasha appeared on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "The CEO Who Transformed Humiliation into a $4 billion Empire." The article chronicled her journey, her fall, and her rise. It detailed how Arcadia Capital had become a symbol of ethical investing. The $50 million fund she created was flourishing, already supporting 127 startups. 3 had surpassed $100 million in valuation. And the Harringtons? They lived with permanent consequences. The mansion sold at auction for 1/3 of its value. Richard faced 3 federal charges. Patricia lost every social club membership she'd held for 40 years. No one wanted to be associated with her. Victoria worked freelance, earning in a month what she once spent on a pair of shoes. Thomas never again secured a job in finance. His name became synonymous with negligence. David signed the divorce papers without a fight. On the final page, Natasha had written, "You could have chosen to defend me. You chose silence. Now live with the consequences." The class action filed by the 23 former employees ended in a $280 million settlement. Every victim received real justice. In an interview, a journalist asked, "Do you regret anything?" "Yes," Natasha replied. "That I waited 3 years. I should have acted the first time I was humiliated. And was it revenge? Was it worth it?" "It wasn't revenge," she said calmly. "It was consequence. They chose to belittle. They chose to discriminate. They chose to underestimate. I simply documented their choices and let the truth do the rest. Natasha built something far larger than the Harringtons ever imagined. Not just wealth, but a legacy. A legacy of intelligence, patience, and strategic justice. Because the greatest victory is not destroying those who wronged you, but building something so brilliant that they must live forever in the shadow of what they could have supported, but chose to mock.